今仔日非常的多谢遮侪人来参加阮这个论坛。今仔日规日落来，大家知讲这非常的精彩。咱这个会目的，就是讲，毋是咱家己要发表物件，是要请美国来讲伊安怎看亚洲，安怎看台湾；日本伊安怎看台湾的安全，甲这个亚洲的形势；印度。来甲咱看，所以互咱台湾的社会进一步了解咱所面临的国际环境。咱台湾绝对毋是一个孤立的国家，咱和中国的关系毋是一对一，是规个亚洲的即个大的形势内底。咱有咱的朋友，这就是即个朋友，就是有一个共同的价值，就是讲民主自由的国家。这和中国的强调讲民族主义是完全无关系。这就是我是讲咱即届会的目的。这最后这个 section 哦，实在是就是讲，规日遮长的讨论内底，真侪足好的意见出来。真侪真会使讲，咱所尊敬的这国外的专家来，互因个就这个会内底，最後因佫要有一個機會通互伊發表嘅。Well, this section actually is not to have a new section, but try to reflect what we have discussed the whole day long, and particularly for our audience, it's very important to understand how U.S. look at Asia and look at the China-Taiwan relation, and how Japan will see their important neighbor of Taiwan facing this new international environment. And it's important for people in Taiwan to understand what Japan's policy regarding the entire regional security in Asia. And this time, we are very, very fortunate to be able to invite our representative from India. I always say India is the greatest democracy in the world and happen to be dominating in the important area, which is the Indian Ocean, could be the next focus of the regional security and peace. So without saying that much, because I'm not thinking to, actually I have about 11 points of memo, but I don't think I should read my memo. But to start with a section, and Professor 林文成教授伊规日拢还未发言，所以我是想讲，互伊先发言。即马煞咧，则为即个印度的迄款迄个司令官叶万惠先生、森本先生、この順序でいきまして、最後に一言だけ。If you want to say any words, you just use your 10 minutes to express your impression in this conference. And then I have a great respect. 我对这个吴钊燮真尊敬。我想讲，我要做结论，不如互伊做结论。伊结論若講無夠的所在，我再來做結論。即馬請，對。迄个，即马先请即个林文成教授。
Ambassador Law, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very honored to join this International Symposium to talk about very important issues. The issues about China's rise and the emerging democratic frontier in the regions. 大家午安了哈。那我按照罗大使的这个模式哈，也是用英文讲跟用中文讲哈。I know I should not be the first one to give my comments because in terms of seniority and in terms of expertise, I should be the last one. But now I know the reason. Okay. When we talk about the rise of China, China's rise. I think, of course, in the past 5 years, we saw, tremendous changes in the region, in Asia Pacific region. We saw, leadership changes in the region, in different countries. For example, United States had a new regimes, and China we saw, the generation changes in the countries, and in 2008, there was a second, power turnover in Taiwan. So the changes in the regions had the impact on almost every country, because for example, global financial crisis hit every country, and United States, the new government in the United States introduced its new policy toward the regions. But the impact to this region, I think the biggest factors is the China's rise. So here I would like to talk a little bit about China's rise. The first question I think we need to ask is whether China's rise is a reality. 就是中国的崛起是不是一个事实 ？And what is China's future? 中国的未来到底是怎么样 ？Can we expect anything from the new leadership in China? 我们是不是可以对中国新的领导人可以有所期望？哈。So I will come back to the first question. So whether China's rise is a reality. If we check a lot of statistics, of course we can say that China is on the rise because China has become the second biggest economy, and China has accumulated the largest foreign exchange reserve in the world. But China is a country which face tremendous domestic challenge. 中国的这个崛起。如果从一些统计数字来看，它似乎是在崛起哈。但是中国是一个面临内部非常非常多问题的这个国家 ，including environmental degradations, of course the rampant corruptions, the gap between the rich and the poor, and the gap between the coastal areas, and the hinterlands, and etc. And more, if we examine China's domestic situations, then we can say, China's future is still quite uncertain. 中国的内部是充满了很多的问题的，包括像贫富的差距的，这个环境生态的这个恶化的哈。这个中国每年死于呼吸疾病系统这个疾病的人是几十万人啊，这个就是贫富的差距的哈。Before Hu Jintao stepped down, he gave a warning to the Chinese Communist Party. He said that without fighting corruption, the Chinese Communist regime, will collapse in the futures. So we can see how serious China the domestic challenges that China faces. But I think that to the international communities. What kind of China is the most dangerous China? 第二个问题我们要讨论的是什么样的这个中国对国际社会是最危险的 ，especially to the Asia Pacific region. 什么样的中国对这个国际社会或是对亚太地区来讲是最危险的 ？I think a strong China with a strong national patriotism. Or an undemocratic China with a strong nationalism. 这个一个不民主的这个，但是高度民族主义的中国啊，应该是对国际社会来讲是最危险的哈。After Xi Jinping took the office, he introduced the Chinese dream. 在这个习近平上台以后了哈，他就介绍了所谓的中国梦。And what is here? His Chinese dream. His Chinese dream is, to create a strong China with a strong navy and armed forces. 这个习近平的这个中国梦是基于这个民族主义的哈，只有基于这个他的这个强大的这个军事的哈。所以after Xi Jinping took the office, maybe some observers expected that he might be a reformer， 有一些人就期望他是一个改革者。But I think so far we were very disappointed with Xi Jinping's policy because he controls media and he even introduced a policy to forbid the college professors to mention 7 topics。这个习近平上台以后，我们对这个习近平的民主改革基本上是失望的哈，而且已经不抱有任何这个期望，因为他上台以后，甚至禁止大学的教师去提7件事情，这个包括就是说这个一些反对政府的事情都不能讲。So I don't think we can expect anything from Xi Jinping. He is not a reformer. I think he is quite conservative. His purpose, is to consolidate the powers and to continue the governing of the Chinese Communist regime. 习近平上台以后的这个他的这个政策是在捍卫他的这个政权，中国共产党的政权，所以他这个是他的主要目的的哈。If we understand his real purpose, I don't think we can expect more from Xi Jinping. But what should we do? When we face such a regime, which is very dangerous to the security in the region, 我们面临的这个政权对亚太地区的这个安全是相当的这个危险的哈。因为recently, a lot of scholars talk about China's Monroe Doctrine. Also, talk about whether Asian countries might be Finlandized. 就是这个面对这样一个威胁的时候，那我们要问的是，我们应该怎么讲？我们应该怎么做的哈？因为现在越来越多的这个学者专家在谈的是中国的门罗主义，然后这个认为亚太地区的国家，尤其是周边的国家，可能被芬兰化。所谓芬兰化，the Finland models means that the neighboring countries of China might cooperate with China on security issues, on foreign policy, on national defense policy. 所谓这个芬兰化的这个政策，就是周边的国家，中国周边的国家可能会在安全或是这个外交的问题上来跟中国做个妥协If we believe that China's policy toward Japan on Senkaku Island or Diaoyu Islands on South China Sea issues is very assertive. Then usually you should try to find the public opinion in China. The Chinese people believe that their government is still not strong enough. Why? Because the Chinese government continue to promote nationalism, patriotism, in order to legitimize the rule of the Chinese Communist regime. So because the Chinese Communist regime continue to promote nationalism, that's why I mentioned that it's an undemocratic China with a strong nationalism is the most dangerous China. 我刚才提到就是说这个我们都认为中国的这个政府在过去的几年对东海的问题跟钓鱼台的问题是很强硬的。可是他们的舆论，他们的人民认为他们的政府不够强硬。为什么会这样子？就是因为他们的政府不断的在这个就是鼓吹民族主义民族主义了所以迫使他们的这个政府更加的这个强硬了Okay, here I would like to talk about is Taiwan a missing link? Well, we talk about what should we do in the futures? What should we do to change China? And what kind of role Taiwan can play? 那这个时间的关系，我就来谈谈就是说，面对中国的这样的一个这样的一个潜在的威胁的那我们应该怎么样去改变中国？然后我们应该台湾到底应该扮演什么样的这个角色了？Frankly speaking, I was disappointed with our government in the past 5 years. I think we missed a lot of opportunity. 在过去的5年，我认为我们政府错失了很多的这个机会了哈。Because United States try to adjust its policy toward Asia Pacific regions, the so-called pivot or rebalancing policy of the United States. Of course, I think it created some opportunity and it gave some hope to the countries in the region. But can we catch this opportunity? 在过去的这个5年，尤其是美国的这个政策的哈，重返亚洲的政策或是说这个再平衡的这个政策其实创造了很多的这个机会。但是我对我们这个政府过去5年没有充分的去利用这个机会，我是觉得蛮失望的哈。If we read very clearly, I think if we read, President Obama's speeches delivered to the Australia's parliaments in November in 2011, I think we can get the message. The United States, refocus its policies on Asia Pacific region. And I think, of course, there was a cooperation between United States and China. But the more the two countries cooperate, the more conflict emerges between the two countries. So I think in 2 or 3 years ago, if I remember correctly, President Obama was interviewed by a TV station. And the question is whether he was concerned that United States might be depressed by China to be the #1 in the world. And President Obama said never. He believes that United States can continue to be the #1. And I read recently an article written by a very famous scholar in Chicago University. He said that United States would never accept the second place in the world. United States would not accept the trend that United States might be replaced by by China in the future. So I think that the strategic situations that two superpowers or an existing superpowers when an existing superpowers face the challenges from the rising powers, there is always conflict between the two countries. Okay, so I think that how can we change China? 这里就问的就是我们如何去，再给我3分钟。Okay, how can we change China? How can we make China a democratic country? If we believe democracy, a democratic China can be peaceful. If we believe that a democratic China can help the securities in the regions, what should we do? I think of course the United States should provide the leadership. That's why I would like I'm very glad to see my good friend Steve is here. I think in the past I was disappointed that the United States did not provide the leadership to promote democracy in China. The human rights dialogue between the United States and China, win no fail. It does not produce any results. And the human rights dialogue between EU and China, between UK and China, or between Australia and China, and Canada and China, we see no impact. We see no progress. So I think we should put more pressure on China to force China to carry out democratic changes, because the real risk, the real dangers to the Chinese communist regime is from within, not from without. The international security situation is quite, still quite good to China, but China faces tremendous domestic changes. So if we can, we want to see a real democratic China in the future, we should put more pressure on China. And as I said, whether China is a missing link, Taiwan is a missing link or not, recently we heard, a voice in the United States, although it is still a minority in the United States, that, United States still abandon Taiwan. And I think, neighboring countries did not realize the importance of Taiwan. Of course, now they know, the problems, or, the impact. In the past 5 years, the cross-strait relations improved dramatically. So China did not need to pay attention, or did not need to deploy its armed forces, or to keep an eye on Taiwan. So China can focus on Southeast Asia countries or Japan. 在过去的这个几年里面呢，台湾两岸的关系改善，然后中国不需要再部署重兵来针对台湾的问题，它可以全力的把它的这个军事力量来针对日本跟东南亚的国家。所以就是说，台湾如果是在这个 security situation if Taiwan is a missing link, I'm sure it does not serve, the interest of other countries. So I think, today we talk about the cooperations among democratic countries. I think, of course, India is very important. Last panel we talk about, the situation in South Asia. Otherwise, China, has negative impact on the security in South Asia. But I think the most important, I think, ties in East Asia to Taiwan is the cooperation between Taiwan and Japan, the two most democratic countries in East Asia. And I think Taiwan and Japan should work together, okay. Okay, I will stop here. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And let's start with Mr. Bhaskar, because in the last section you may not have a chance to react to many of the comments. So please, if you want to say anything.
Actually, I will wait my turn. I'll listen to my other colleagues.
Oh, okay, all right. Then let me invite Mr. Stephen Yet.
I was tempted to wait my turn too. But, yeah, I hear you. There were a couple of questions that came up when I had the opportunity to speak earlier that I don't think I was able to address directly. There had been issues related to, they were in my paper, I think, the tendency the U.S. government has had since 2004 until the most recent election to pick a side in Taiwan's politics. And the essential judgment that has been made by elites in foreign policy in the United States, and it's replicated in other countries, where as we see ourselves busy in one part of the world, we want everyone else to just be quiet. And in the 2004, 2008, and 2012 elections, the United States government indirectly, in some cases directly, made clear what it thought the party in Taiwan was that would be quiet. Now, over the years, I have had an opportunity to go to DPP rallies. They are not quiet. And so you can imagine which party speaks up, speaks directly, and wants to actually change what the establishment considers to be the status quo. And if the establishment in both major parties in the United States, and again, replicated in many other countries, just want Taiwan to just be happy with what you have, and they don't really believe that you are at risk of losing what you have, I would fully expect in 2016 similar statements to come from the Obama administration as came from them in the 2012 cycle, and came, frankly, from the Bush administration. I was a part of the administration, wasn't very happy with the way they were understanding and executing their policy towards Taiwan. Apparently, I didn't know enough about Taiwan to help them understand what their errors were. Taiwan then, to have a vibrant democracy, I mean, it gets a little bit at Wencheng's point about human rights. We can't really have a policy that's addressing human rights in China if we're stepping on the human rights of the people of Taiwan in order to engage the government of China. There's just no credibility whatsoever in trying to advocate human rights in China. But I think that most Americans, if you get away from what I consider to be the anti-common sense capital of our country, and you talk to just ordinary Americans, governors, business people, and regular citizens of our country, they are going to understand principles of self-determination. They are going to understand the desire of people to be in control of their own future. So one of the challenges that you will face is how does the opposition in Taiwan mount an effective campaign for change in 2016, knowing that the international community is going to vote on the other side. So I just think when you know in advance what the landscape will be, you have a chance of overcoming what the obstacles will be. There will be dissenting views in the United States, but look at what the Obama White House did to Tsai Ing-wen as the nominee in 2012. All of you probably have your own view of what Tsai Ing-wen was like as a candidate, as a chairperson, what have you. I respect your view. But one thing she was not was scary, unpredictable, erratic, all of the things that were the excuses for why denounce a potential leader of Taiwan. And yet, very clearly this happened. And so I think that perhaps the DPP nominee in 2016 should not go to Washington and open himself or herself up for this attack. Focus here. Focus on taking care of your people, your economy, your prosperity, your education system, your future here. Win here. Don't go abroad looking to influence the election here. Now, I think I'm very interested in the topic of the China dream. The American dream, you may have heard of it, but one of the key differences between the American dream and whatever we can understand about the Chinese dream is, as an American, I believe everyone in the world can share the same experience we yearn for in the American dream. No one can say that about the China dream. It will only be to the benefit of China and to the people in power in China. That's their dream for control in the future. The American dream is something everyone can share. I know that it's not always seen that way, and sometimes we hurt our credibility by not honoring our principles in the way we treat our friends, and people in Taiwan know it more than the average partner in the world. So that's probably it for the time allotted for a quick round here, but happy to take questions and comment as we continue. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that Mr. Baska is ready to speak.
Let me pick up, if I may. Thank you very much, Chair. If I want to pick up on Steve's point about the dream. I heard this being discussed this morning in the first session, and I had a few thoughts about that. And if you allow me, I just see whether I can link it up with DPP and whatever I know, little bit I know about the politics here, and what is the dream, what is the vision. First of all, I'm encouraged by some of the observations made in the last panel about the rise of China, which is what our dean, the first speaker, also said. How real is it? I mean, there is a narrative about the rise of China, which has been advanced and very selectively pushed forward, quite successfully, I would say, by Beijing. I visit Beijing maybe once a year, Shanghai, alternately, and I've been doing this for some time. And I always come back with a slightly different perception. And whenever we talk about India and China, let me give you my perspective on this. A lot of people say that the rise of China has been very dramatic, and the number of people who have been lifted out of poverty, and various statistics are given, which is fine. Now, when you talk about any country, particularly countries like India and China, and I'm very thankful to the chair for making this point, that India and China are at one level comparable because they are two civilizational states. No other major states have this unbroken link with their civilizational past. There are other differences, diversities. But when you talk today in 2012, 2013, people say China has risen. Why? China's GDP is $6 trillion. By 2025 or 2030, it will overtake United States. It will be number one. Chinese defense expenditure is so much. All of that is there. Now, by the same yardstick, India is seen as falling behind. We have just crossed $1 trillion. Now we are 1.6. But now the rupee has become very weak. So we have our internal problems, financially and economically. But when you compare India and China, it always strikes me that the political aspect is not given enough value. I mean, if you were to say that China, out of 100 marks, you give it trade and economy, 30 marks, 30 out of 30. Military, you can give it 20 out of 30. But for politics and what I would call as human values, and I'm picking up from the first session, and if you were to give this roughly, say 20-20, politics 20, human values 20, I would make the case that China scores very low there, maybe 5. And I'm saying this based on my own experience, interaction with what I would say is some very thoughtful Chinese. That what happens after your GDP becomes $20 trillion or whatever, what about the people? By the same token, I want to suggest that for India, despite all our internal problems, it's a very visible democracy, it's a very untidy democracy. We have poverty that you cannot hide. You just have to drive through Mumbai or Delhi to see poverty. Today on Indian television, people stand up and say that Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is very weak and he has not delivered. All of that, I mean, that's part of the democratic experience. But I see that as a positive, the transparency and whatever you may say, candor or the way in which our debates and discussions are conducted. And even on the human side, though we have poverty, we have corruption. One of our biggest problems in India today is political corruption of a very high magnitude. We are trying to deal with it. But the fact that we are bringing it out into the open, I would give that a higher, shall we say, ranking. So I am suggesting for your consideration that the rise of China, and maybe even if you say the decline of India or the stasis of India, has to be seen in a far more comprehensive way. And that is where I am again taking the liberty, Chairman, with your permission, to say that what is the story of Taiwan? There are 2 points in this panel now. China's rise. I am saying there's a question mark. If we have time, I'd be very happy to share my thoughts about Bo Xilai. I spent a week in Singapore. I had a small engagement with the LKY Lee Kuan Yew School. And I must say that my own sort of observation and picking up about what the Bo Xilai trial actually represents to me is a very important, I think, vulnerability of the Chinese political system. That's my, observation. So, first of all, question mark about China's rise. And regarding the emerging democratic frontier in Asia Pacific, I want to pose this question to you, having heard this whole morning, saying, what is the Taiwan story? Steve finished about the American dream, We can talk about the Indian vision. We more or less wrote it down in August 1947. My question to you is, what is the Taiwan story in 2013? And in terms of the democratic frontier or the democratic background of Asia Pacific, how and where do you see yourself? Because at the end of the day, and this is my purely personal sort of view, I think that, if you were to recall the Hong Kong story, I mean, I think in many ways, I could outline maybe 4 or 5 possibilities for you from Taiwan, from what you might say is very positive, to most undesirable. And I think in that sense, I just want to say that I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I know your constraints. For 10 years, I've been trying to understand Taiwan in a political sense. We are familiar with some of the, shall we say, international norms, including my country. I think one of my discussants put up a slide where he said no Indian elite will stand up and say that we will support Taiwan against China, which is true. Which is true about all the big countries we spoke about the kind of political spaces we have created. But I am saying that notwithstanding that, this is the age of communication. I mean, Taiwan represents great technological competence. And I do not get a sense that you have made up your mind. I mean, you have a lot of internal BPP rallies are very noisy, sure. But what about Taiwan and the outside world? What is it that you have stood up for about your democratic story, vision, conviction, whatever? And if so, I think you have a very strong story to tell, both to Beijing and to other, shall we say. And there is an amazing amount of an undercurrent today about the non-state. I think the strongest non-state is not the Al-Qaeda. It is actually, if you ask me, the Facebook and the social revolution that is going on. And there are many stories to be told. And I don't get a sense, if there is a story and I missed it, I'd be grateful if you just alert me to it, because I think you have a lot to share with your, shall we say, interlocutors in Beijing and along the Asia-Pacific frontier.
Thank you. Now may I invite Monomoto Sensei. Yeah.
I have just one remarks at the last stage. As all of you can share the same vision and concept, but I think future prospect of Asia for the future prospect of Asia, I think what kind of direction that China is going to, especially Chinese regime can maintain stable rules of their country and community under the single Communist Party dictator. That kind of system will work, however, or not. I think this is most important criteria for the future prospect of this area. And also the relationship among US, China, Japan, India, especially Sino-US relationship is a key factor for the huge prospect of China. I think most of the people can share the same perceptions. Unfortunately, our relationship with China so far absolutely stalled since we nationalized the Senkakus just a year ago when I was a defense minister. But China's strong pressure to our country, claiming sovereignty of territory, and also they want to indicate a possible more active action against us if we make some facility or infrastructures on the Senkaku Island. But I think it is very clear that we cannot make any kind of compromise. We have no such kind of intentions. Our Prime Minister very strong determination not to make any compromise with China. But China still continue to passage, which is not innocent, in a territorial water of Senkaku. in order to demonstrate their sovereignty. And in that case, US-Japan needs to work close together to handle such situations. Meanwhile, of course, Japan must stay calm in dealing with China and not to provoke them. And we have to continue being careful and patient to avoid situation which can be taken as Japan trying to provoke them. However, Chinese lies will become more clearly and significant, and also expand their influence and power projection in some domains, especially maritime area. We cannot expect something happen in a very high tension of scenes of Senkaku. However, we have to prevent any kind of possible armed conflict, whatever happen in this area. So therefore, posture and system and very strong determination to react against any kind of provocation by reinforcing a US-Japan alliance and our defense posture, and also multilateral cooperation is, I think, important, especially multilateral security cooperation among nations which can share with the common values and security interests and concept, such as democracy, freedom of navigation, and the order by law. I think this is a key issues for in order to maintain the peace and stability in the region. So Taiwan and Japan share the border each other. If something happen, the happening very seriously affect the national security for both countries. We have to assist or help each other. We have nothing but to do so. So in this sense, I think this is a normal sense that exchange very close information each other, and also a mutual understanding and discussion. And always we discuss what kind of contribution and cooperation between both countries for the stable society in this region. I think this is most important criteria to share some interest as possible. So we have to make an effort. I think this is a very crucial obligation for the not only for future prospect, also our child and our child's child. I think this is basic direction for the momentum. And I think this is, again, I think this is a basic obligation for the people who still alive in our life. That is my remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Although I'm chairing the session, I realize that the issue is so important. So I also will take the 10 minutes to express my view, and particularly in my own language, so the more people can understand. 我想小可暂缓，因为本来这主席是袂使发言，但是我讲规日落来，我发觉讲，我都爱 顺这机会讲一寡家己的意见。今仔日中国经济发展10%，但是大家拢无了解，中国是蛋糕大、蛋糕食、蛋糕棒。什么是食？食世界资源。所以因拄仔在讲印度洋是安怎都有迄个舰队，迄个珍珠项链是为着啥目的？为着要保护伊即个石油的路线。即个因拄仔讲印第安迄个马拉加迪勒马迄阵就是胡锦涛讲，中国的石油2/3是通过马六甲海峡，即条12000海里的即个海洋线是中国的生命线，毋是干那尔，毋是干石油，非洲的资源。今仔日中国派200万人伫非洲在争取伊的资源，所以中国这个经济若无资源是无法度继续的。啊，当然蛋糕棒，这属于 pollution 的问题真严重。我因过伫联合国的大学，联合国派我去，我去做中国的趋势发展。我甲大家讲一个结论：伊10%在成长的时阵，伊环境的破坏拢总甲算的。这伫联合国叫做 Green GDP 绿色的 GDP， 我算起来伊的损失是8.9，哪咧算起来伊真正成长是1.1。这就是即摆讲蛋糕大、蛋糕食、蛋糕棒，但是这第二个资源这个问题就关系到亚洲规个的这个战略上的考虑，因为日本原是进口资源所在，所以这马拉加海峡原是日本的生命线，所以日本比美国更较重视亚洲的这个安全的问题是伫啊，所以今仔在这摩里摩多教授讲。日本甲美国对中国看有温度差，温度差就是伫迄个国家利益切身的关系。啊，即摆安倍伊就开始讲，伊要变一个普通的国家，所以美国无得较退档，但是日本呢，伊就赶紧要增加伊的这军事预算，希望家己会当保护伊这条生命线。啊，这样代志就是日本甲台湾生命共同体的一个联系。啊，至于这印度洋呢，我咧讲，伊个印度伊早嘛有讲，伫迄个伊含巴基斯坦冤家，会使讲争独立了，但是这喀什米尔所在，伊中国来插手。啊，伫迄个nepal甲印度的交界，差不多5万平方公里，中国讲。迄是阮的领土，啊！印度甲问讲是安那是领土？伊讲传统上就是阮的领土。啊！印度讲，咱这都要照国际法来处理。啊，第二，国际法上包括这钓鱼台的问题也共款。你会使主张讲钓鱼台是你的，但是国际上要尊重2个原则。第一就是讲按照国际法来处理；第二就是爱和平的处理。伊这中国。就这个钓鱼台，伊拢违反这2个国际条例，所以这讲起来，这个中国的这个崛起吼，毋是讲咱这我早讲的这个天，就是后壁有迄个中国经贸这个发展的一个安全的问题。啊，第3点我爱讲的就是讲，超1990年迄阵政治学的顶端有一个重要的理论，叫做民主和平论，表示讲政二次大战了，民主国家毋捌战争啊，但是非民主的国家中间有战争，啊，民主国家甲非民主国家战争，所以我即用这题目民主连线，那民主国家迄阵哦，伊绝对会用找闹迄个 conflict， 闹迄个，伊绝对会用和平的方法。但是中国这个国家毋是民主国家，伊就是要用武力。哦，这是我安尼听这讲了，我说想讲啊，先甲争取发言，真歹势，多谢。我是啊，即摆请这个张旭成教授。
Okay, earlier several issues raised, and I will speak to some of them and raise questions. How to change China? 好多有人提出到这关一寡问题，我即摆要就这个问题来讨论，到这关对这讲者问一寡问题啦这个这关林文定教授讲到这个问题，要安怎改变中国？这是错误的问题啦。要安怎改变这只老虎？这老虎会较乖呗，你咪好食爱伊会较乖呗，中国因为这共产党的体制一党专政，无可能民主，无可能尊重人权，所以对世界永远是一个真大的这个威胁啦，所以呢，这我是感觉讲，that's a wrong question. Well, instead of changing China, you have to contain China, caging China. 將這隻老虎放入人嘅內底，可以袂出來，所以都要保衛。我感覺這是真正重要嘅策略啦。Very important strategic issue. It's not to improve China, to bring the human rights to China. It will never succeed. Yeah. So I would say that well, contain China, put China like a tiger in the cage. That's the way to do it. And our issue, our main issue, talking about in the context of rise of China, the cooperation among the emerging democracies, the alignment, that's certainly, the strategy we have to consider. I'm going to talk about issue, corruption in China. Now, Xi Jinping and others are pursuing this campaign against corruption, and especially oil faction, 石油帮, the attack on Zhou Yongkang. Well, he was godfather of this oil faction. And this has very important foreign policy implications. 過去這個中國那就講真強，對外呢一直真硬就對了。什麼原因？因為決策嘅界定嘅內底有三大派，主張這強力向外，真正硬嘅這個政策。PLA 軍方啦，自由邦。甲這有這關國營嘅企業，這力量會結合呢，使中國嘅這外交部，甲中國共產黨內底嘅國際聯絡部，因嘅聲音攏加真低。So the question is that with perhaps collapse of the oil faction, currently they are under attack, under purge. Would China's foreign policy be shifting also? Because in the past, within the Chinese leadership, the PLA, the oil faction, and also the SOE, state-owned enterprises, these are the forces calling for more militant and more outward foreign policy. Now we see purge of the oil faction. Do we see some changes, shift in China's foreign policy? This is an issue we can discuss later on. Now I have a question for our friend Steve Yates. In light of Syria and U.S. reluctance to use force, do we see an end to U.S. rebalancing in East Asia? Well, this is a debatable issue because we see, for example, U.S. House just adopt Taiwan Policy Act, and we are certainly gratified by that, but the Senate hasn't taken any action yet. And so we're wondering what's happening in Syria might have some negative implication for U.S. commitment to Taiwan. Okay, I'd like to also raise a question for our Japanese friend. I remember that a long time ago, 1969, Prime Minister Sato and Nixon has a joint communique saying that the Taiwan and Korean Peninsula are an integral part of Japan's security. And then 2005, 2+2, US-Japan 2+2 communique, well, certainly re-emphasize peace and security in Taiwan Strait. It's also a very important part of US-Japan's concern. And Japan supposedly might want to do something. And I assume that, the democratic government, the Japanese government under the Democratic Party, to which our Japanese friend was part of that, also supports 202 communique. Yet I saw in his paper, page 73, Taiwan seems to be a missing link of Japan's efforts to cooperate with Australia, India, and ASEAN countries. I wonder why Taiwan is not mentioned over there. And also I'd like to raise a question for him that now Japan may try to change the 3 principles of arms export. Japan 可能改变伊的这个武器输出的3原则啦，是不是日本有可能考虑台湾？这将来日本的武器，包括这个潜水舰啦、潜水艇，是不是会当这款卖予台湾？还是日本的这个专家来台湾给咱做？ I'm raising this question that arms export 3 principle in the future. Would Japan be willing to do something more to buttress this 2+2 communique and the arms export 3 principle? Would someday Japan be willing to help Taiwan to strengthen Taiwan's defense capability? Because this is not just for Taiwan, this is also for Japan. Okay. And finally, about India. Well, we are very gratified that the Indian government has openly stated India is interested in having FTA with Taiwan. Unfortunately, Taiwan's government under the Kuomintang Ma Ying-jeou has not shown any interest. But earlier, in the earlier session, the issue was raised that India wants 10,000 Taiwanese teachers of Chinese to go to India, and this is kind of a very important culture cooperation, but we only send 7. Well, Taiwan has a very vibrant and very powerful private sector, civic groups. If the Ma government would not do it, can the Taiwanese civic group do it? 我講印度希望台灣派1萬個人去甲教中國話啦，因無愛中國嘅人去，因為台灣人去。但是呢，馬英九政府現在派7個人。我講台灣嘅民間嘅企業啊，是咱嘅公民團體，真正在講活躍，真正有資源，咱是唔是會當民間來做這項代志？ 加強再加印度嘅合作啦，因為印度嘅政府現在希望跟咱台灣簽這 FTA 自由貿易嘅協定，但是馬政府唔敢啦，驚喺中國做關解罵啦，所以呢，做關是唔是咱台灣這個民間會當來做？因為過去民進黨政府執政嘅時陣，咱做真濟代志，甲印度會有做關軍方也好啦，是有做關政府嘅關係有加強。 但是呢，咱都要準備講有一日民進黨當來執政嘅時候，咱會當做什麼代志？Thank you.
Well, now I invite吴钊燮代表。
老大师多谢。老大师吼，今日互我真侪任务啦吼。大概是老大师看到我举着麦克吼，尤其是讲英文的时阵吼，拢特别兴奋啦吼。所以上尾即个叫我讲，叫我讲较济点播啊吼。我想简单甲大家讲，较等我要讲啥吼。刷落了，因为咱才有一寡迄个外国朋友吼，台湾话中文听无吼，我就刷到英文去啦吼。我想下早啊，甲大家讲有一件代志吼，可能毋知影大家有听清楚无？就是讲，迄个昨发生一件。就是讲，即马国民党政府去窃听咱的国会的领袖即件代志，这伫咧其他的民主国家，这是无可能发生的代志。即使发生，嘛无可能像马政府安尼讲，我甲伊听，我听到啥证据摕出来，这一句话一句话讲互你听，这是违反民主的代志。尤其是伊对伊的政治的对手安尼做，这是袂使。大家会记得尼克森总统。就是选举的时去窃听伊的竞选的对手，伊知影讲这是袂当互知影的，所以开始咆哮到尾啊，咆哮去互掠着所以伊需要时间。像即款代志伫咧民主国家发生的时阵，即政府都爱时间，即个总统都爱时间。所以我甲大家讲，即件是足严重的代志，即件是违反民主政治的代志。恁来看，咱今日即场迄个讨论的主题，就是 Democratic Frontier。就是民主的前沿，就是讲所有的这民主国家拢爱合作起来。咱若讲台湾这个民主的最起码的这个价值，咱若无去把握着，咱凭啥物？咱要甲其他的民主国家要徛斗阵？所以这是一个足基本的代志。当然咱看到迄个亚洲吼有真侪这战略的这变化，尤其是中国的这个崛起。尤其是中国军事的这崛起，伊伫咧东海加伫咧南海遐对台湾，伊拢声称伊是核心利益，所以不断的空中。咱台湾拄啊伫咧即个战略地位当中，咱台湾即地咱若徛无在的时阵，我想其他的国家拢会去受到真大的影响。所以对未来，我想咱台湾家己爱徛好在。咱台湾家己爱甲咱所有即个爱好民主的即好朋友，甲因讲好清楚，就是台湾是一个国家，台湾毋是中国的一部分。台湾人民希望台湾永远会当保持即个独立的现状。若讲台湾人民有法度甲咱这好朋友，甲咱这民主国家的其他的好朋友，甲因清楚的讲，阮就是要保护阮家己的利益，阮的利益是甲恁的利益徛头阵的。我想。其他国家才有法度知影了解讲，咱台湾的利益是伫咧倒位，嘛才有法度知影讲安怎来甲台湾来合作。对未来，我想有几点真重要的。较等我用英文讲互咱遮好朋友听。头一点就是讲，中国的这经济已经开始咧崛起啊，但是美国原来了解讲，这是一个真大的问题所以伊要杀 TPP。但是即摆马政府伊要甲中国用服贸协议刷落要货品协议，但是对 TPP 讲哪讲咧，拢无咧做，因为甚至是伫咧南洋内底有一寡人，就甲你讲，因咧讲诶，讲算诶尔，无真正要做。马英九即摆开始是讲，迄个 TPP 伊要10档，刷落去用笑讲10档了，你毋知伫倒位啊？伊讲8档，但是有咧准备无？无咧准备。所以对咱台湾来讲，足重要诶。就是讲，咱爱加入 TPP， 加入即个泛太平洋即个国家所有的这经济系统内面，毋若干那讲，咱讲要加入，咱嘛爱要求咱的好朋友，包括美国、包括日本等等的国家协助咱台湾爱加入 TPP 的协商。第二点就是来讲，迄个爱甲中国讲，你做的啥物件是对的，你做的啥物件是毋对的，包括中国对民主的迫害，这是毋对的，咱来。明白甲因讲，中国伫咧网络世界所做的这物件，因毋对的，咱来明白甲因讲。对台湾即马咧做的，包括迄个军事的威胁，包括外交的封锁，这拢是毋对的。是讲伫咧东海，讲这是我的核心利益；伫咧南海，讲这是我的核心利益，这拢是毋对的。毋若干那咱甲中国讲这是毋对的，咱爱甲咱的即个好朋友，包括日本、包括印度、包括美国等等。拢互因了解讲， 咱来当做甲中国讲，恁做的即款物件是毋对的。若讲大家拢会当甲中国讲，即款物件你爱动起来的时阵，我想咱合作的时阵才有迄力量。另外就是讲，咱台湾是一个脆弱的地方。伫咧太平洋即个防线面顶，伫咧即个 democratic frontier 面顶，台湾是上脆弱的。这脆弱的原因是因为几个因素，包括咱台湾家己内部的因素。因为即马马英九的政府是甲中国蓝调调，我想这大家拢知影，我毋免讲伤济。另外一部分就是讲Stephen Yates 迄个叶万辉先生会再来讲的，就是讲美国的政府因为其他的因素对台湾的即个忽略是愈来愈严重。咱台湾是迄个对美国的 commitment 来讲是渐渐的弱化，这对咱台湾来讲是危险的，这对规个东亚的情势来讲，这嘛是真危险的。所以伫即部分，若讲要强化的时阵吼，咱台湾都爱拍拼，尤其是爱甲日本迄个增加更较好的关系，爱甲其他的民主国家爱迄个强化咱甲因的即个关系，这是足重要。迄个甲美国增加即个安全的往来，若讲美国因即马有顾虑的时阵，咱台湾家己都爱注重咱家己生产的即个武器的即个方式。当然。迄个咱台湾若讲要生产武器，咱家己若讲有一寡能力的限制的时阵，拄则迄个有其他的先进讲的，就是讲日本是毋是会当协助咱？这就变足重要。另外就是讲日本对咱台湾来讲是愈来愈重要，尤其是美国对台湾的这个 commitment 是愈来愈弱化的时阵，咱台湾一般的人民甲马英九咧想的无共款啦，马英九可能看到日本就想到迄个第二次世界大战啦，想到南京啦，想到日本就开始起啊皮喘呢但是咱台湾人民，咱看喺民调内底，咱感觉对咱台湾上友好的国家，就是日本这个国家。所以咱台湾人民对日本是感觉讲这是足好的朋友。像我较早伫陆委会咧服务的时阵，有一寡日本来的朋友，我甲因讲，我能够看着你的眼睛，然后告诉你说。我很爱日本这个国家，我不会感到愧疚，因为这个是从我内心发出来的话。咱若讲，咱会当互咱这日本的朋友不断的了解讲，日本对台湾来讲足重要的，台湾对日本来讲嘛足重要。所以两个国家的关系会当来更较加强啦另外就是讲，转来咱台湾我们未来咱要安怎？这就变做咱明年这个一个足重要的题目。我想今年我都请到咱美国较早足重要的官员，我都请到日本较早足重要的官员，甲迄个印度足重要的这官员来甲遮。我想大家的这个共识拢真悬啦，大家的共识基本的原则，这共识拢真悬。但是为着未来，若讲真正讲要会当合作的时阵，我希望讲明年咱要讨论的。是更较细节的物件，咱伫咧倒一方面会当来合作，伫咧经济方面要安来合作，伫咧政治方面要安来合作，伫咧国防方面要安来合作。这是对咱来讲，大家拢是拢会了解，拢足重要的代志啦。Now I'm going to switch it to English, as requested by Ambassador Law. China's rise is something that we understand. It's a very important phenomenon. It's rising in the area of economy, in the area of political influence, and in the area of military affairs. And what we see, especially in the area of military strength of China, is something that is very scary. Chinese Navy has passed through the first island chain several times in its major organization of fleets. And I think Minister Morimoto has mentioned about this, and we also noticed that. It is very important for all of us to understand that China's military rise has accompanied expansionism. It's trying to send its fleet to pass the first island chain. It's claiming that this part is his territory, its core interest, not only Taiwan, but now Senkaku Island and then South China Sea. And it's not stopping at Taiwan. It's moving eastward, and now it's moving southward to South China Sea. And if we have a chance to catch a Filipino these days, I think they're going to tell you they are quite frightened that China started to occupy their islands now. And this is a situation that many of us here in Taiwan are very concerned. And I'm sure many others are also very concerned because this is a situation very similar to what happened before the Second World War. Nazi Germany, its economy was good, and it has lots of confidence, and its military was very strong. So it started to expand, and nobody was stopping it, and therefore there was Second World War in Europe theater. And in East Asia, Japan was very strong. Japan's military was rising, and it felt that it was invincible. So it started to invade other countries, and it became the Second World War in the Asian theater. And in order for us to prevent something like that happen, I think we need to work together. All democracies need to work together to tell China that what you do in this regard is wrong, and what you do in that regard is wrong, especially in the area of its domestic persecution or violation of human rights. What it's doing in cyber security is wrong, and what it's doing over Tibet is wrong, and what it was claiming about Taiwan is definitely wrong, and especially when it's claimed that Senkaku Islands is part of China. That is wrong, and when China is expanding in South China Sea, it's definitely wrong. And we need to work together to tell China in a very clear way that its expansionism is not welcome. Its expansionism is very dangerous. And in order for all of us to be able to work together to strengthen our democratic frontier, I think there were several things we can think about in working together. The first thing is the TPP that was proposed by the US government these days. Even though President Ma Ying-jeou expressed his interest in joining the TPP, but the first he was saying that we will be joining the TPP in 10 years. And then under some pressure, he says that we will join the TPP in 8 years. But as far as I know, he was not doing any preparation. But for Taiwan to join the TPP together with other democracies is extremely important because this will be a counterbalance to China's economic rise. And another thing that is very important is for Taiwan or for other democracies to work closer together to form a more powerful alliance or an alliance or relationship powerful enough to stop any kind of invasion or aggression from the Chinese side. In that regard, I do have very high expectation for Taiwan and Japan to work closer than before. When the DPP was in power, I saw lots of exchanges in between the two sides in security arena. Our commanders in Navy or in Army was able to visit Japan for exercises. And then the Japanese officials was also able to visit Taiwan for exercise observation. And I think that was a very good basis for us to expand to other fields of security cooperation. And if we can form a stronger relationship with each other, I think it's good not only for Taiwan, but it's also good for Japan. And I'm sure the United States is going to look at it as a very positive development as well. And in cooperation in between Taiwan and Japan, or among the Asian democracies, it is very important for us to think about details. And I'm very glad that we have representative from the United States. We have Minister Morimoto from Japan, and we also have Commander Bakar from India. And I think we basically agree on the basic principles of how Taiwan or how fellow democracies can work together. And this is a very good starting point. And it warrants our next year's conference to talk about more details of how we can work with each other in economic aspect, or in political aspect, or in military aspect. And I think this year's main theme for the countries in the democratic frontier to work together is just an excellent one. And I commend the organizer, Ambassador Lo, for having this conference. And I certainly hope that we can do the same and talk about details for next year's conference. Thank you very much.
Well, maybe we'll continue next year. Well, I think that this is a really, we are Taiwan National Security Association. It's a very small organization, but somehow we are very lucky enough to invite so many distinguished speakers from abroad. And I also must extend our thanks to many of the chairmen, section chairmen, panelists, and all your active participants in this wonderful symposium. And I think that we have been continuing over the last 4 or 5 years, step by step, looking into the Taiwan's broader prospect in the international community, particularly in Asia Pacific. On the other hand, it's very fortunate last 5 years, our government somehow give the wrong message to the international community. That's why a majority of Taiwanese have to speak out and let foreign countries to fully understand what the people in Taiwan understand. If I may quote, one of the survey, or many survey, came to the same conclusion. If you ask them, what should be Taiwan in the current situation? 90% will say, let's maintain status quo. Means not to be part of China, but also don't want to express their view. But if you take out this item, only no maintenance quo item, then the result is 68% or more were looking for Taiwan independent. Only about 10% would like to reunify with China. So this is Taiwanese people are very smart. They know what they want. But on the other hand, the current government want to, take up a pro-China, status, which maybe create not only problem of Taiwan, but create a kind of the, uncertainty to the entire Asia country. To let China to use the so-called, expanded view to take over Taiwan. But anyway, I think that, currently, Taiwan has to have a good, peaceful relation with China. But based on the equal status, not to be like Hong Kong with Beijing. That is not the equal status. So I think that we have a wisdom to initiate the kind of the equal status negotiation peace with the mainland China, which will send the much broader message to the world community. And so this conference, our purpose is to have our foreign guests from Japan, US, and India, for them to give us how they see the area situation. And I think that we have get benefit, but also very encouraged by their presentation. But on the other hand, we also have them to bring back our message to their own respective country. How the people in Taiwan think about their own future, think about their relation with China, to the Indian, to Japan, and to the United States. Then that will serve the purpose of our conference. Again, I thank you, everybody. Oh, huh? No. Well, you want to continue discussion? Okay, I'm sorry. Oh well, well, I think that because you may have the voice from the audience, but see, when we prepare this conference, we should have prepared some so-called paper for you to raise the question. In our past experience, it's not very productive when people speak about their own view may not be addressed to the issue. But rather your issue, I can take up that even among our panelists, if you want to have a final word to say, it will be most welcome. You want to say?
Well, thank you very much. I think I will add a few words. I will just, this time I will just focus on Taiwan. I think, I would like to remind, the Taiwanese people or the DPP friends about, the challenges, or, that, we face in 2016. So I think, number one, I think the structure of the population in Taiwan has been changed. So far, we have more than 300,000 Chinese spouses, and I think in 2016, I think maybe there will be more than 200,000 Chinese citizens who nationalize into Taiwanese citizens and who are qualified to vote in 2016. So that's number one. Number two, I think the influence in the China's influence in Taiwan will be increased in 2016 because China's policy toward Taiwan is to Hong Kongize Taiwan. With the 19 agreements signed between the two sides of Taiwan Strait so far, and I'm sure there will be more agreements signed between Taiwan and China in the future. And those agreements will help the China's capital or influence to penetrate into every corner of Taiwan. So I think my point is that a divided DPP cannot defeat KMT in 2016. So I think the DPP to be united is very important to win the presidential elections in 2016. And the second point I would like to raise, because Perry also mentioned about, he raised some questions, and Joseph also mentioned some questions to our international friends. So my question is, or my point is, the international community, especially neighboring countries, especially Japan, should ask the question, whether the existence of Taiwan is important to their country or not. If it is, if the answer is yes, then of course those countries should understand to help Taiwan is to help their own countries. So I think that's very important to Japan. Japan should think about that. In the past, I think Japan is always very shy when it comes to the cooperation with Taiwan. So I would like to remind the Japanese friend, no matter how hard you try, China just cannot be your friends. So I think you should give up the hope that you can make efforts to be friend of China. So I think that, as I think Perry or Geoff just mentioned, Taiwan is the most friendly countries toward Japan in the regions, and Taiwan is the most important countries to Japan in terms of the securities of Japan. So I think that Japan should think how to help Taiwan. Of course, Joseph just mentioned that we should join TPP, and he pointed out that our government has not tried very hard, to join TPP. Of course, we should help ourselves. We should try to liberalize Taiwan's economy. We should try to be ready. But I think I would like to suggest to our American friends or Japanese friends, don't wait. I think sometimes they use an excuse that Taiwan is not ready. That Taiwan is not liberalized enough, so Taiwan is not ready. So they would not enter negotiation with Taiwan. I think, of course, we criticize Xi Jinping's Chinese dream, but I would like to ask the question, what is our dream? What is the Taiwanese dream? I think we should have a dream. The dream is that we can join international organizations, and the other countries should help Taiwan to join, both, economic, organizations. So those countries should not use the excuse that Taiwan is not ready. I think, if we can enter, the process of negotiation with the United States or Japan, maybe it might take, 10 years or 20 years, but it will increase our confidence, increase Taiwan's confidence, if we can enter negotiations. Sometimes the negotiation can, create momentum and can create pressures to push us to carry out, for example, economical, cooperations. So I think, that's my comments. Last comments. Thank you.
Raise questions to our.
I think Paris asked us a couple of specific questions. One with regard to Syria and the tragic situation that is playing out there, and does the American response there represent the end of the rebalance? And to me, I hope it is very, very clear from my paper, I don't believe the rebalance began. And something that doesn't begin cannot end. Unfortunately, I do think that the developments in the Middle East raise questions about commitment to allies and coming to defense. I think that actions in Syria right now, or the choices framed by our president, are two very bad choices. They shouldn't be the only ones, but he is choosing between something impossible, a limited strike on chemical weapons facilities only, or giving up and backing away and emboldening basically enemy forces in the region. That is the state of American leadership right now in the world. I am not proud of it. I think that our country can and must do better, but any of you looking to rely upon some of that great leadership might want to be careful for the next few years and hope for a new energy to come in American foreign policy in 2016. But personally, I am very concerned that if we handle this kind of a crisis this badly, what would it be like if Kim Jong-un decided to do something dramatic right now? We have very dangerous parts of the world that we need to take more seriously. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening at the moment. I am happy that parts of our Congress have passed legislation like the Taiwan Policy Act. I will say, because I hope you understand this is coming from a friend, it changes nothing. Because the House of Representatives can do anything it wants. It could perform show tunes, create a Disney movie. It could have Arnold Schwarzenegger come and announce new policy. It will change nothing because the Senate will not touch the act. We went through this in 1998, 1999 with the Taiwan Security Enhancement Act, and I am very grateful that the House of Representatives historically will continue to speak up for these issues, but it is going to take change in the Senate to make change in the law. And I would really rather that in America we had pressure from key constituents in the states, and we wouldn't have to rely on the Congress in this regard, and that our presidential candidates and new administration in 2016 might have initiative to move policy in the right direction. Fundamental problem is that the United States chose to put itself into a false trap. And it has 3 words: one China policy. It is a lie, and it has trapped the United States in thinking about Taiwan policy. And frankly, it is an atrocity to the English language. It means nothing in English, and it's American policy. It makes me very angry, but I'm too jet lagged to show how angry I am right now. But the Taiwan Policy Act has very good content, and very well-meaning people pushed things through the process. And we should be grateful for the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives for showing interest to do this. But as I look at the Syria hearings we just saw in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, you have a leader on the Democratic side who reluctantly is supporting a policy he doesn't believe in, and you had a Republican leader. I sort of wonder why he's even there, because he voted differently from the rest of the Republicans on the committee. And so we just don't have a chance right now to have constructive legislation, and foreign policy shouldn't have to be run from the Congress, but in extraordinary circumstances like the Taiwan Relations Act, and perhaps the way our government has been failing to address national security concerns, our Congress will have to become activist again. But that will only happen when there are many more new senators. I hope to be a part of that process at some point, but that will take some time. But we are a long ways from the days of when we had a Claiborne Pell on the Democratic side and a Jesse Helms on the Republican side, and there were bipartisan warriors to push back against falsehoods from an executive branch talking about foreign policy. So our hope for the future is a long push, but it is somewhat similar to Taiwan's situation. I understand and deeply sympathize with the concern people have for the future of Taiwan, but frankly, if I were Beijing, my greatest nightmare would be imagining that I could control Taiwan. You, the people of Taiwan, survived decades of martial law, decades of violence, and came out on the other end of that with an identity and a strength and an ability to push forward. And so I would be very scared about my ability to truly control Taiwan. And your greatest strength is that spirit, that commitment, that perseverance. And that is not something money can buy or weapons can destroy. And I hope that it's that kind of a spirit that can continue to be cultivated among allies. And if America is not leading, hopefully others will step forward and carry the weight until we can come back in and pick the weight up together and move forward in the future. Thank you.
Any other comment? There are no questions. Any comment? Sure.
It's going to be very simple. I think this is a very rare opportunity for us to have visitors from Japan, from the United States, and from India. And the reason why they are here is because they have friendships in Taiwan. And for that, we need to be grateful. 所以为这3个好朋友愿意对因的国家来参加这个真重要的会议，表示对咱台湾的这个友谊我想咱家是不是该大声该拍鼓啊一下show our appreciation to the visitors from Japan, from the United States, and from India.
Well, with this, we close the symposium. Thank you.